Desperation Friday, and here's why. The great Joanna Klonsky standing by, dear friend, old friend. I've known Joanna. I was thinking about this. She hates it when I do this. I don't care. Since she was 5, ladies and gentlemen, she was 5 years old. Now I'm going to blow your mind. When she met me, I was, hold on, let me do the math. You carry the one, 35. God damn, we've known each other a long time. 30, was it 35? Yeah, 35. Good God. Article I wrote about Bill Ayers. Long story, not worth reminiscing about any further. I immediately reached out to Joanna because I wanted to do a show about the Graham Plattner debacle up in Maine and what it says about politics in this day and age, Democratic politics in particular. And she was so down for it. I knew she would be. And years ago, we used to do on a regular basis a show when I was on the radio called The Creep Report. We would profile the awful behavior of various powerful men. This is when Me Too was in its prime, and we did this like once a month. I mean, there was no shortage of horrific human beings, uh, in both parties, political parties, when it came to politics, but in corporations, corporate law, business world, Hollywood, uh, and so I said, "Oh, let's bring back the Creep Report just to talk about Graham Plattner." Uh, I'll set it up a little bit, and then I'll turn it over to Joanna, and I know she's got a lot to riff on about this because, like I said, it just crossed over into so many arenas, so many areas, including what I call desperation, in this case of Democrats. But I will say that I must confess, I was caught up in the Graham Prattner fear. I was like excited by his campaign. I did not dedicate a full show to him. I talked about him in passing, but he seemed to have like emerged from a long, twisted journey, not unlike the aforementioned Bill Ayers. That's just popped in my mind, Joanna. That was the reason I met Joanna when she was 5. I actually met her parents, and she was tagging along. But who was on his own strange, twisted journey, as so many Americans go through. Joanna shaking her head, going, "Where are you going with this, Ben?" And uh, that was the headline of the story that I wrote about Bill Ayers. Joanna, it was something like the long journey of Bill Ayers. Anyway, so Plattner had emerged as like this sort of fearless advocate for all the lefty ideals that I have. And I have had for years and years and years. And it seemed as though he had gained these insights through years of hard living that included time in the military, in the Marines, fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq, uh, drug addiction, alcoholism, uh, rough and tumble life. And he had gotten his act together and was running a business and had become a Bernie Sanders Democrat. And he wanted to move into politics. And I was like, oh, wow, this is just the kind of real person that the Democrats need in this day and age of fake and phony Democrats. And then bit by bit, stories about Plattner emerged that were very revealing and embarrassing. Like the one about he has this Nazi symbol tattooed on his chest, and I was like, "Ah, we all make mistakes." Sorry, Joanna. We all make mistakes. None of us are perfect. He apologized, and like seems like MAG is filled with people who are still sort of advocating Nazi views. So I don't know why we should be so demanding that Democrats not be pure. So what was some of the other scandals? Some texts we were revealed, or not texts, but social media posts. And I'd hear his defenses. I read the interview, a long interview he gave with the New York Times. It seemed like he was going to survive this. He's going to come through. A flawed human being, but the perfect person for the time. Well, then the story breaks about rape, and I mean, an old girlfriend came forward. Joanna will probably go into details a little bit about the revelation and how it came out. And it was just too much for me. I immediately believed the girlfriend when she told the story. I didn't believe him. Part of it is just the fact that she went forward and put herself to that public humiliation to get her story out. And I believed her, folks. And that's too far, even for desperate times. I can't, I just can't walk away from that. Now, I know MAGA, they don't have the same sensibilities. Their leader is under a court order to pay how much, Joanna? $5 million to E. Jean Carroll. Joanna, I've talked about that case many times over the years. But I'm sorry, I hope the Democratic Party has higher standards when it comes to sexual assault in the candidates that it supports than Republicans. So now I'm curious, how in the world did this guy get in that position? Like, who plucked him from obscurity in Maine, put him up to run? How did they think they're going to get away with all these potentially devastating revelations? And what does it say about politics in general? So I said, Joanna, you up for it? She goes, yes, I am. So here she is. I'm done with the introduction, Joanna. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me on yet another unfortunate occasion of men behaving badly in politics. Seems never ending these days. I think you did a good job recapping the situation. There's a few things that I would just tack onto it. One, many people along the way were flagging, hey, something's not right about this. It's not just the Nazi tattoo. The Nazi tattoo alone would have been concerning enough, but it's not just the Nazi tattoo. It's not just these very concerning Reddit posts, which, by the way, if you haven't seen them, he's questioning rape survivors' accounts. He's talking about how Black people don't tip well. He's saying a whole host of offensive things. It's not just the philandering on his wife, the sexting with other women, also using an app called Kik, K-I-K was how he did it. So that's an app that is not just a normal app that everyday people use, that there's a lot of nefarious, like, apparently it's an app that's used a lot for sex trafficking and other kinds of like really troubling behaviors. It's not just the account of his ex-girlfriend who said that he held her arm behind her back, locked her in a room until she calmed down, other very coercive behaviors that weren't quite sexual assault, but were also disturbing. It took all of that to come out before the actual account of credible sexual assault for some people to say, okay, now I believe that he's a problem. And so to me, the question is, how do we get here where we have a person where there were so many people raising concerns? It seemed like he had an apology video that he had to post like every other week where he's saying, don't judge me based on the worst thing I ever said on the internet one time several years ago. That's not really who I am. I was going through PTSD from my time in military combat. Don't judge me for this. Don't judge me for this. Don't judge me for this. Where at some point it became such a pattern of behavior where we had to say, okay, what have we gotten ourselves into here? And we've hitched our wagon as a party to this person. We've made sure nobody else could be in the primary against him in a meaningful way. And the imperative is to win back the Senate. The imperative is to beat Susan Collins in November so that we can stop all manner of atrocities that are going on with the Trump administration right now. And so what is the best way to do that? Fundamentally, we were in a debate in the heart of the Democratic Party to say, we need people like Graham Plattner who can motivate the base, turn people out, appeal to white working class men. That's been a big part of this question. Versus if you raise any questions about him, if you express concern, then you must want Susan Collins to win. Then you must be happy with white working class men being alienated from the Democratic Party and supporting Trump. If we're not going to welcome people like this into our tent, then we might as well just give up the whole coalition and give up the whole thing. So there's been quite a toxic debate going on for months. I will say for my part, and this is not me being like, oh, I knew all along, Ben, should have listened to me. I never got on the Graham Plattner train because the Nazi tattoo was good enough for me. I'm like, that's not the sort of thing one gets by accident. Sorry, I just don't. I never believed it. I don't think that's a thing. And so, but when I would engage in conversation with my fellow progressives, especially political operatives about this race, who were very enamored by him, especially I've noticed those who were in the room with him and saw him speak in person were really convinced that it became a thing of like, Joanna, you're doing your Joanna thing again. You need to like ride with this one. This is what we need. We need people like this. And so I think the conversation I want to have now, I don't think we need to relitigate. This thing has been covered more than anything's been covered ever, right? I think people can go read articles about this and learn the facts if you aren't familiar with what's been going on. But the question is, how do we get here where something so consequential is now potentially sabotaged, the Maine Senate race? And in many ways, we, the progressive movement, did this to ourselves. And so how can we recalibrate and make sure we don't end up here again? And I think a big part of it is when there's a million flashing red lights going off, we can't just cannibalize ourselves, attack each other, and say, if you're raising questions, if you don't want to vote for the guy who says, yeah, these people crying rape need to, be questioned, the kind of stuff he was posting on Reddit, there has to be space for us to validly question our own folks without it becoming a thing where it's like, you're just a purist. You don't want to accept the working class, which is a problematic phrase or claim unto itself that we can unpack as well. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Well, there's a lot to follow up on that. I could go down a path about the quote unquote white working class, which hasn't voted Democrat. I mean, probably since Johnson in '64. So I think we should just concede that these voters are Republicans and break free from the notion that somehow or other there's a way to get them back, because you can't get them back to a place they've never been. They're Republicans, and you can try to figure out why they're Republicans, but that's reality. I want to get into the vetting, and I'd love for you to explain to regular, everyday people who are not involved, never been involved in a political campaign, what goes on in a vetting process. Joanna's worked for many politicians down through the years, worked on campaigns, and so she's vetted on behalf of politicians, I guess before she made her decision to work for them. And then when she was working for the candidates, the politicians, she was vetting her opponents, or people that the campaign employed were vetting them. So what goes into a vetting process generally?
Well, usually you have, especially for what's gearing up to be an expensive U.S. Senate race of this nature, you have an opposition research firm that performs the research on yourself as a starting point. And then you review it, you go back and forth with the candidate, any red flags. You may see things in the opposition research book that are addressable or fixable before someone even gets into the race. For example, someone may have an outstanding property tax bill or a lien or financial issues. Hey, can you pay this off? Can we get this resolved before you launch your campaign? Let's do it. You may see flags about a divorce or a past relationship. Then it's on you as a campaign team to go to the candidate and say, hey, talk to me about this person. What's the whole story? And it seems like Graham Plattner was a person with a knack for manipulation, and I shouldn't talk about him in the past tense, he's alive, is a person with a knack for manipulation. It seems like he convinced the people around him, like every time something would come up, they say they'd go to him. Is there anything more to this? Is there anything we need to know? And he would say, no, I swear, there's nothing else. And they would believe it. There was coverage of this, that he met with Bernie, Elizabeth Warren, and a number of other senators who had endorsed him about a month ago when the New York Times story came out about Catherine Fifield, who was another ex-girlfriend. At the time, they asked him, hey, is anything else coming out here? Anything we need to know? And he was like, no, nothing else coming out. Nothing else is coming. So the thing about a vet is that it can catch a lot of things. It wouldn't have caught the credible allegations of sexual assault because Jenny Rasico, the accuser, has never pressed criminal charges. It doesn't seem like she pursued this formally prior to this moment. And so it wouldn't have come up. It would have been that either he needed to disclose what had happened, or he needed to provide a list, like, here's all my ex-girlfriends, you could go talk to them. But at some point, there's only so much a vet's going to turn up. And he's not going to say, yeah, I raped this girlfriend a couple of years ago. And so it's unlikely that would have, that a thorough, it seems like the people who recruited him did not, it seems like they said they didn't do a proper vet before they recruited him. They didn't do a full vet. They did a cheapo vet, which is to me, malpractice. Those people shouldn't be allowed to do what they did again in our party, period. There's a host of other reasons why they shouldn't, and we can talk more about that person and his own sexual misconduct allegations that he has against him. But the point is, I don't think this rape allegation would have come out in a proper vet, but everything else would have. The Reddit posts came out, some of them did. The Nazi tattoo, we should have been able to suss out in a vet, and some of it did come out. And so the question is, well, what's your threshold? Why wasn't the Nazi tattoo enough for folks to say, you know what, actually, that's disqualifying. We don't want to spend a whole cycle explaining why our candidate has a Nazi tattoo. We're going to go with someone else here.